Hi, and welcome to Run Tall, the YouTube channel that's dedicated to all runners everywhere. I'm Tim, and I upload new running videos every week. This week, I'm going to be taking a look at two different carbon-plated racing shoes. I'm going to compare the two. There's both some similarities and some differences. And I'm talking about the Hoka Rocket X and the New Balance Fuel Cell RC Elite. Now, there are some things that I like about both shoes, and there are some things that I don't like about these shoes. And also, if you want to skip around or skip to the parts of the video that are of most interest to you, I've made it easy for you. So if you open the description, you'll see there where I've laid out chapters for you. Simply click on the timestamp for the part of the video that you want to watch, and it'll take you right there. But before we get into this too far, I'm going to show you what it looks like to run in both of these shoes. So I'm going to take them out to my state park for a run. But then when we get back, we're going to take an in-depth look at these two shoes to see which one might be right for you. Now, I took both these shoes out on the same run. So I ran the same terrain, both in the Rocket X as I did in the RC Elite, so I could get a good comparison for you guys. And the one difference that I will note is simply the weather. And now I've run in these shoes, both of them in both cool and hot weather, but in that running demonstration video that you saw just a second ago, it was colder for the RC Elite. When I was out running, it was in the 30s. A couple days later, it was back in the 70s again here. So for the run in the Rocket X, I had on shorts and a short sleeve shirt. But other than that, the terrain, like I mentioned, was exactly the same. So let's start by looking at the cost. Now, there's a big difference here in the cost. Now, the RC Elite is the most expensive of the two shoes, and it costs $225 US, while the Hoka Rocket X is $180. So definitely a big difference in the cost between these two shoes. I think that the Hoka Rocket X at $180, I can just tell you right up front, spoiler alert, it's well worth the money. Okay, now let's take a look at the weight on these shoes. Now with the RC Elite, it's a little bit lighter. It comes in at 7 ounces on my scales, and that's for a men's size 9, or 199 grams, while the Hoka Rocket X comes in at 7.4 ounces, or 211 grams. Now let's turn now and we'll take a look at the upper in both of these shoes. Now, both of these racing shoes have an engineered mesh upper. Hoka calls theirs an open mesh. But let's take a look at the Outsole RC Elite first. And as we move our way around the shoe, you'll notice that up in the toe box that it has, lots of perforations there. It has a little bit of 3D plastic overlays for their logo, but not really much else going on, in terms of the upper and things that are on it. Again, this is pretty much stripped down racing shoe, just like the Hoka Rocket X is. They're very similar that way for these two shoes. So now let's take a look at the Rocket X, and you'll see that, again, perforations in the toe box, very little in terms of plastic overlays with the exception of their logo, all the way around back to their heel counter. So the shoes are very similar from that respect. Here's where they differ. So the Hoka Rocket X is much cooler underfoot. That open engineered mesh, not exactly sure what Hoka means by that, but I can tell you from experience that it's really cool underfoot, much cooler than the RC Elite is. So if you're going to be running in warm temperatures, the Rocket X is going to have the advantage here. But both are very breathable. Don't get me wrong, the RC Elite, there's nothing wrong with it per se. It's just the Rocket X is probably that next level of breathability in a racing shoe. The other thing I want to note is with the RC Elite, now that upper fit me perfectly well. Across the midfoot, I really enjoyed the fit. And, I ordered a men's size 9, and I would say that it absolutely is true to size. And I certainly appreciate that. Now with the Hoka Rocket X, I'm not sure that I got that same experience. So as you can see with the upper on this particular shoe, just how tight those laces are, that's pretty much right off my foot. So in order to get that upper to be snugged down across my midfoot area, I had to really bring those laces in. And the laces are long already, way longer than they necessarily need to be. So much so that when I'm running, I put a triple knot in the shoe just so that they aren't dragging the ground when I'm out on the road. So that's the one thing that I don't like about the Rocket X is that the upper, if you order your size, true to size, you can probably expect that you're going to have that same experience where you almost have to bring that material completely together to get it cinched up on your foot. Now, I think I might be able to resolve that by ordering a half size down. That's not uncommon for me with some Hoka shoes. They don't always seem to be consistent in their sizing. The Rencon is another example where I felt for me personally, I could go down a half a size and it would probably fit me better. So I might be able to eliminate that knock against the Hoka upper simply by ordering a different size. But I don't have that opportunity right now, but I might check that out in the future should I order a replacement pair. Now with the eyelet chains on both these shoes, they're pretty standard. There's nothing complex about either one. They're very, very basic, but they get the job done. The difference is in the tongue of the shoes. And then we'll look at the Outsole RC Elite first. And you can see that it's not a gusseted tongue, but they have these big wide wings that lay flat across your foot. And that felt really comfortable. I didn't have any issues there at all. The tongue didn't migrate. It didn't bunch up. It's pretty lightweight. It's not padded per se, but it is a thicker material. And, that's a little bit different than the Hoka Rocket X. They have a semi-gusseted tongue, so you absolutely don't have to worry about that tongue ever migrating around or moving or getting out of place at all. And much like the RC Elite, however, it's not padded either, but it's just kind of a thicker material there. But I found both to be comfortable and adequate to keep me, comfortable when I'm out running. Now let's look at the padding around the heel collar and tab of each of these shoes. They're pretty comparable to one another. The Hoka Rocket X might have just a little bit more padding around the collar, but both were very comfortable. The one difference to note is in the heel, and you'll notice that on the RC Elite that it has a slight Achilles heel flare, while the Hoka Rocket X has more of a cutout there for your Achilles heel tendon to set in, but both were comfortable. I enjoyed running in each of the shoes, in regards to the padding around the heel collar and tab. Let's look at the heel counter on both of these shoes. And it's just something that I do pay particular attention to simply because of some pronation issues that I deal with from time to time. And let's look at the RC Elite first. And you can see that it has a little structure here as I give it the pinch test, but not a ton, more than some other carbon-plated racing shoes I've been in. But in comparison to the Hoka Rocket X, the Rocket X has a lot more structure here in that heel counter. And you can even see that they have some reflective material around that heel counter as well. And, it might add just a fraction of an ounce to the weight of the shoe. But I always appreciate having a little reflective gear on me when I'm out running, especially this time of year, when you're forced to run in the dark, whether you like to or not. It doesn't get light till about 8 o'clock in the morning, and it gets dark about 6:30. So if you want to get out and get your workout in, chances are you're going to be running in the dark. So anytime I can get a little reflective material on my gear, I appreciate that. Now let's take a look at the midsole on both of these shoes, and we'll start with the FuelCell RC Elite first. And one interesting note before I get into it is that both of these companies, both New Balance as well as Hoka, they're advertising that the foam that they used in these two shoes is their latest and greatest, most lightweight, most responsive foam that they have to date. So we're seeing the best of the best from both of these companies when we're talking about the midsoles. With the FuelCell RC Elite, they have a 34 millimeter stack height of their FuelCell foam in the heel and a 24 millimeter stack height in the forefoot. So they've got a 10 millimeter drop from the heel to the toe. And they have that carbon fiber plate that runs throughout that midsole. And theirs is a multi-directional carbon fiber plate. And that simply means that it will flex on initial contact, but then it'll pop or spring back to give you a little more propulsion through your foot strike and your gait cycle, to help you improve your pace as well as give you a pretty natural feeling underfoot as you're running. Now, we're going to compare that with the Hoka Rocket X. Now, they too, again, this is the best of the best that they have to offer. They have a 5 millimeter drop from the heel to the toe. They have a 32 millimeter stack height in the heel and a 27 millimeter stack height in the forefoot. They also have that carbon fiber plate. Now they have what they call their meta rocker technology, which basically means that they start sculpting that foam and they have that carbon fiber plate that work together that's right around that metatarsal head to give you that nice roll through technology that they're become pretty famous for in their shoes. And that feels really comfortable, really natural underfoot for me. Here's the biggest difference between these two. The FuelCell RC Elite, to me, is pretty unstable. Now, I don't mean that in the sense of having a tall stack height like you would on the Next Percent, where you're just kind of up there waving around. And I've mentioned that in other videos before this one. The difference as to what I mean by stability. I'm talking about pronation. And with the RC Elite, this foam is really soft in that heel, but it's really just too soft. So if you look at that run footage, you can see that this really just collapses pretty darn fast when I'm out running. So, if you're a neutral shoe runner and you can get up on your forefoot when you run, it's probably not going to be a big deal for you. But for a midfoot striker like myself and somebody who overpronates, this shoe seems to amplify that. Now, it doesn't mean I don't enjoy running in this shoe. I do. It's very quick. It's very responsive, very propulsive, just as advertised. But the problem is I can't run in it that way for very long before I start running the risk of injury just because of the way that my biomechanics work. But again, if you're a neutral shoe runner, you might not have that issue. For me, I have to limit my use in this shoe to shorter races. So even though this shoe was intended for half marathon and marathoners alike, for somebody that overpronates like I do, that kind of stress on my ankles and so on, I can really only get about maybe, a 5K, 10K in this shoe. But I do enjoy running in it, and I will keep running in it. But again, I'm going to be picking it up for those shorter durations. If I'm doing some workouts, I'm training for a half marathon right now. And so for some of my speed work, like speed repeats, things like that, this shoe is perfect for that. Gets me right up on my forefoot. But for longer runs, not so much. So let's compare that with the Hoka Rocket X, a much more stable platform. Now, this is a shoe that I can run in for pretty much as long as my legs will carry me without having to worry about pronation issues. It's much more stable from the terms of, pronation than the RC Elite is. And it is a quick shoe. Again, as I mentioned, I've been training for a half marathon, and I took it out on a time trial, which is basically some speed work. I'm about week 3 in the training block, and it wanted me to, part of my Garmin coach's app had called for me to, training program had called for me for this time trial where I warmed up for a half a mile, and then I ran basically, pretty much full out, 90% or so, for a mile, and then I cooled down. And I set my fastest pace in the Rocket X. So to me, that says something. It's not only stable and pretty cushioned. It's much more cushioned than the Carbon X. If you got experience in that shoe, this is an upgrade from the Carbon X in my opinion. It's lighter, more responsive, and a little softer underfoot. So I'm really enjoying the midsole and the Rocket X in general as a shoe to run in. Also, the other thing I wanted to mention about these two midsoles is with the Hoka Rocket X, I felt like my weight was centered. I didn't feel that way in the Outsole RC Elite. I felt like my foot was kind of hanging over the medial side or the arch side of that midsole material. So let's turn now and we'll flip these shoes over and we'll take a look at the outsoles to see how they're protecting their latest and greatest midsole material. And you'll see with the Outsole RC Elite, they have their Dynaride outsole, and that's really more almost a lug type pattern on the bottom of that shoe. It's not extremely thick, but it shouldn't be for a racing shoe. I kind of like it. They have most of their foam is covered with that Dynaride up from that midfoot all the way to the toe. And then, of course, they have rubber in all of the strategic areas around the heel. Now, with the Hoka Rocket X, it's simplicity. They've got their rubber, again, more towards the forefoot of the shoe, not quite as far back into the midfoot as the RC Elite is, but they also have that rubber that protects the around the heel area, which would be the high abrasion areas that you would need to be concerned about. So between these two shoes, I prefer the Hoka Rocket X. Now, it's simply because it fits my gait cycle better. I don't have to worry about my pronation issues that I have to deal with. And it's quick. It's fast for me. It has become my favorite shoe to run in at the moment in terms of an up-tempo or tempo shoe, progression run shoe. And I'm certainly at the top of my list for my next half marathon. I do have a place for the Outsole RC Elite in my workouts, but I'm going to be using that more for my speed work. So things like stride repeats and speed repeats. Hey, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, maybe give it a thumbs up. As always, run tall, run strong, be kind to one another. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.